Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's KD. And for today, we have an Aimiuwu. Yeah, and Aimiuwu will be taking us on the topic understanding Scrum framework.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. You have the floor. Go ahead. Thank you very much.
All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Hame from the Bincom Dev Center team. And today I'm going to be taking the topic understanding the Scrum framework. So, okay, I'll first start with, Okay, sorry. All right, thank you. So today, like I said, I'm going to talk about understanding the Scrum framework. Like we all know, Scrum is an agile methodology, and agile actually means to work faster and to perform tasks and perform projects or programs or product development faster within a complex environment. So Scrum is a lightweight framework that helps people, team, organization generate value through adaptive solution from complex, awesome. For complex problems, Scrum employs an intuitive and incremental approach to optimize productivity and to control risks. Scrum engages group of people who collectively have all the skills and expertise to do the job and share or acquire such skills as needed. So like we can all see here, to be in a Scrum team, you have to be cross-functional and you have to be self-managing. Cross-functional in the extent of you have to be able to have all the skills required to create the project. No, self-managing, is you have to have all the skills necessary to create the project. And cross-functional is all the team has to be independent enough to understand what happens to be needed for the project to take place. The area of the Scrum theory, Scrum is founded on empiricism and lean thinking. Empiricism actually means knowledge gotten from experience, while lean thinking actually means reducing waste and focus on the essentials. Scrum combines 4 formal events from inspection to adaptation within a continuing event, which is a sprint. And these events work because they implement the empirical Scrum pillars, which is transparency, inspection, and adaptation. So in transparency, according to the Scrum guide, the emergent process and work must be visible to those performing the work as well as those receiving the work. That means in a Scrum team, you have to be transparent. You have to be open about all the impediments you are facing and all the challenges you are facing in the Scrum team. Make sure everyone knows, everyone is aware of all the processes involved, all the rules involved in the Scrum team. And it means that every part of the process should be clear and as day for everybody on the Scrum team. Then inspection, the Scrum artifacts and the progress towards agreed goals must be inspected frequently and diligently to detect potentially desired variance or problem. So like I said before, each Scrum team must be transparent. So if you are transparent, you'll be able to know if a particular team member is having some difficulties and be able to escalate to the team member. While inspection is knowing that there's actually a problem to solve. So you have to, a Scrum team has to follow an inspection pillar, which means that you have to be able to note or detect when an issue or a difficulty arises during performing a development team or development project. Then adaptation, if any aspect of the process deviates outside acceptable limits, or if the resulting product is unacceptable, the process being applied or the materials being produced must be adjusted. Like we all know, Agile actually focuses on accepting change, which is to make sure that you can actually change a particular process to, instead, if there's a change in the industry, it's easily adaptable to change. So adaptation is just like the Scrum team being able to adapt to change. Then the next slide, I want to briefly explain the 3 empirical pillars, which is the transparency, inspection, and adaptation. So now, for example, as you can see on this slide, there's a car which is moving towards, like it's moving on the road and moving towards like a pole on the road. But we can also see that there's a sign on the road, which means that you can't actually pass that particular that particular roadside, which means that in a project or in a Scrum team, you have to be able to be transparent. You have to be able to inform everyone of the difficulty you are facing in the Scrum team. And also the next picture we can see here is a lady who is texting and there's actually a hole in front of her. Now, in a Scrum team, you have to be able to respect if there is any challenges going on before it even arises. So you'll be able to move forward and be able to release valuable products. Now, the next slide shows a car which has almost entered a hole. This means that the car, that means the driver was not able to inspect or able to know that there is actually a hole there. So that is why the car actually went into the hole. So in a Scrum team, you have to follow the 3 empirical pillars, which is transparency, inspection, and adaptation. Adaptation, which means you should be able to adapt to change. So you should be able to know, transparency, you should be able to know that, okay, yes, we have a problem. Inspection, we have to see that there's a problem coming up. Then adaptation, we have to be able to have the knowledge to move away from the problem, knowledge to solve that particular problem before the problem arises. Then we come to the Scrum values. So we have 5 Scrum values, which is commitment, focus, courage, respect, and openness. So in a Scrum team, or for a Scrum team to work well, you have to be committed to the team. You have to be focused on the team. You have to be courageous. That means you should be able to have a tendency to face challenges. Then you have to be respectful. And there's no hierarchy in the Scrum team. Everybody is the same. There's no boss. There's no team lead or anything in the Scrum team. So you have to respect each and everyone in the development team. And a Scrum team also has to be open. There has to be a direct communication between the Scrum team. So the Scrum team consists of a Scrum Master, a product owner, and developers. And within a Scrum team, there are no sub teams or hierarchy, like I said earlier. Scrum teams are cross-functional, meaning the members have all the skills necessary to create each sprint, and they're also self-managing, which means that they internally decide who does what, when, or how. So if you are like a developer in the Scrum team and you are having difficulties during the technological aspect of the project, you can actually come together as a team and discuss the difficulties and solve it instead of looking for an external body to come and solve that problem for you. So it's also advisable in the Scrum team that are cross-functional and self-managing, which means that they can have all the knowledge necessary to actually solve any issues or any problem they are facing on the team. And the Scrum team consists of 10 or fewer people, which helps to communicate better and be more productive. It's advisable for a Scrum team to be lesser because they work better when they are lesser in a team. But that doesn't mean that you can't have more than 10 people in the Scrum team. You can have more than 10 people in the Scrum team. But if you're having more than 10 people in the Scrum team, it's advisable to divide the teams into subgroups, like sub-teams. Like if you're working on a very big project, so it's advisable to divide the teams into sub-teams where they have 2 development teams working on the teams. So I'll talk about that later as well. Then the Scrum Master. Scrum Master is more like a servant leader. He's the facilitator and the person who is in charge of making sure that all the Scrum events are productive, positive, and kept within the time box. And a Scrum Master also assists in the effective product goal definition and product management, product backlog management with the product owner, and also remove barriers between stakeholders and Scrum team. Also, the Scrum Master is also the one that helps eliminate impediments within the team. Then the next person we have in the Scrum team is the product owner. Product owner is more like a value optimizer. So it helps optimize value on the Scrum team. And the product owner is also accountable for the effective product backlog management, which include developing and explicitly communicating the product goal, creating and clearly communicating product backlog item, ordering product backlog item, ensuring that the product backlog is transparent, visible, and understood. Like I said earlier, in the Scrum team, they have to be openness, they have to respect themselves in the Scrum team. And I know that one of the empirical pillars of Scrum is actually transparency. So the product owner that is one that will make sure that everything on the product backlog is clear and understood, so that the developers will be able to interpret it and be able to make sure that everything that is written on the backlog is visible enough and transparent enough and understood enough for them to work on the development of the project or the product. Then also the product owner is the only one who has the ability to cancel a sprint. A sprint can be cancelled only if the sprint goal is obsolete. That means maybe the sprint goal is not relevant anymore or is outdated. That is the only reason why a sprint can be cancelled. And also the product owner is the only one who is expected to change anything on the project, on the product backlog, and only the one to manage the product backlog. The product owner can actually delegate his tasks to someone else, but the product owner is fully responsible for anything that's going on in the product backlog. Now, developers are the people in the Scrum team that are committed to creating an aspect of usable increments each sprint. So after each sprint, I'll be discussing more about sprint later. After each sprint, then there's something called product increments. Product increment has to be within at least one usable product increment has to be releasable every sprint. So the developers are the one that make sure that the technological part of the project is done, the agricultural part of the project is done, and the infrastructural part of the project is done well. So the developers are responsible for creating the plans for the sprints and hold each other accountable as professionals. Like I said earlier, there's no hierarchy. In the Scrum team, there's no hierarchy. So there is not like a UI UX design team lead. There is no front-end developer team lead. Everyone on the Scrum team is equal. So nobody is taking orders from anyone. Everyone on the Scrum team, in the development team of the Scrum team, work together as one. And the developer is also responsible for estimating the product backlog item with the help of the product owner. I'll be discussing more about this later. And developers make sure each product, developers also make sure that each product backlog item adjusts the definition of done, and so that a valuable increment will be produced or released each sprint. Then we'll now talk about the Scrum events. Now, each Scrum event is a formal opportunity to inspect and adapt Scrum artifacts. Now, we have 5 Scrum events, which is the sprint planning, daily Scrum, sprint review, and the sprint retrospective. Sorry. Then now a sprint is more like a container for all the sprint events. Sprint is the heartbeat of Scrum, and there are fixed length events of 1 month or less, or 1 month or less to create consistency. A new sprint starts immediately after the conclusion of a previous sprint. Like you can see in the figure below, you can see that this sprint starts with the planning process up to the execution process. And when you start a sprint, you actually start by sprint planning, and you end the sprint by sprint retrospective. So when you've completed the sprint retrospective, I'll be discussing more about that later. You immediately after a sprint, the next sprint starts. There's no pause or there's no taking a break within a sprint. Immediately after a sprint starts, the next sprint starts until a product increment is being created, and all the product increments are being added. All the product increments from each sprint are being added to create the final product. I'll be discussing more about that later. Then now let me briefly explain what the Scrum events are. Then the Scrum event, like I said earlier, starts with the sprint planning. During the sprint planning is when the product owner explains everything on the product backlog, sorry. So when it explains everything on the product backlog, then the developers take the information from the product backlog to create their own sprint backlog. I'll also be discussing this later, explicitly later. And then during the sprint planning, the product backlog is created. During the sprint planning, the definition of done is created. I'll be explaining what the definition of done is later. And also during the sprint planning, this is when the development team and the Scrum team entirely come together to decide the forecast of how long the sprints will take place. And yes, so during the sprint planning takes about 8 hours. So it has to be 8 hours or less. That's a time box of 8 hours. So it's the sprint planning event should not take more than 8 hours to plan. Then the next event after the sprint planning is the daily Scrum. The daily Scrum is explicitly attended by the developers alone. Nobody is expected to attend the daily Scrum except the developers. Now, the purpose of the daily Scrum is for the developers to review what they've done in the last 24 hours and also to review what they are going to do in the next 24 hours. So the sprint during the daily Scrum, that is when the developers come together and talk about any difficulties they are having within the sprint backlog, and they have like a daily plan of what to do next for the next day, because the daily scrum is actually done every day, and the daily scrum takes about 15 minutes every day. The daily scrum has a time box of 15 minutes, so the daily scrum should not be more than 15 minutes every day. So the next one is the sprint review. The sprint review is more like a demo session where the key stakeholders and the Scrum team come together to review what they've done so far. And before the sprint review, at least a usable increment must be released. So during the sprint review, this is when the Scrum team actually shows the key stakeholders a product increment that they've created. So at least one product increment must have been created during the sprint review. So now the key stakeholders review all the items that they've created. And we should also note that if an item on the product, an item on the product backlog item does not meet the definition of done, that particular product backlog item cannot be released. So that means if it cannot be released, then maybe during the sprint retrospective, then during the sprint retrospective, the Scrum team can now come together and decide if they need to add that particular product backlog item to the following sprint. So the last event we have on the Scrum team is the sprint retrospective. Sprint retrospective is when all the Scrum team come together to review all what they've done so far, review all the challenges they faced during the sprint, review what they are going to do next in the next sprint. And this is also a best moment to update the definition of done. Then now the Scrum artifacts. Then in Scrum, each artifact contains a commitment to ensure it provides information that enhances transparency and focus against which progress can be measured. Now in Scrum, we have three artifacts, which is the product backlog, sprint backlog, and the increment. The product backlog commitment is the product goal. That means the main reason why the main focus in product backlog is to reach the product goal. The main focus in the sprint backlog is to meet the sprint goal, while the increment is to make sure that all the product backlog items meet the definition of done. Then I want to briefly explain what it means by product backlog, sprint backlog, and product increments. Now, the product backlog is being managed by the product owner, just by the product owner. No one else has access to the product backlog. The product backlog is more like a list of undone jobs. That means a list of tasks that needs to be done by the development team. So what the development team do is they create a sprint backlog where they pick items, the items on the product backlog and the product backlog items, they are more like user stories, right? So they pick up all the items, all the tasks that they need to do. So they pick it up. They don't pick everything. They just pick what they need to do for that sprint, which is then added to the sprint backlog. Then during the daily scrum, the developers work on each item on the sprint. In the sprint backlog, we have the product backlog item, we have the sprint goal and the sprint plan. So the next one is the product increment. The product increment is more like a finished work of what they've done so far. So it's more like a new version of the work they've done. So after they finish every product backlog item in the sprint backlog, is then created, is then created to a product increment. The product increment, like I said earlier, is the new version of the product. And for every sprint, at least one usable product increment must be created at every sprint. Then I want to explain what a product increment is to further explain what I just said earlier. Now, like I said, when the development team work in a sprint, so what they do is they create a product increment at each sprint. Now, for example, now the first product increment they created was a bike. Now, do you know that a bike, yes, a bike is actually a good product, but is it faster? Is it safe? Is it convenient? No stuff, they have to consider that. Then if they now release that particular product, you get, so they now release it and people use it, like maybe even, there might not be many people, but like can be like a minimum viable product, right? So people actually use it and realize, okay, yes, it is nice, and give feedback. Okay, it is nice, but we need something faster. We need something, you know, that can get me to job on time and stuff like that. So they come again, getting the feedback from their customers or getting the feedback from their stakeholders. They come again and work on another sprint to make a better product from what they've done before. We should also know that each product increment integrates throughout the sprint. So the product increments that you've created in the first sprint will be integrated in the second sprint, and the product increments you've done in the second sprint will be created until the final product has been created. So now you have a bike in the first as a first product increment. Then the next one you've produced is a motorbike, is a motorcycle, which moves faster, and it actually gets to you to where you're going on time. And now the final product will probably be a Tesla, which we all know is actually the most convenient car right now because of it doesn't use fuel and stuff. So I feel like that the final product should be better than the first product increment created in the sprint. So now tell me, which product increment will you actually prefer? Will you actually prefer a bicycle, a motorcycle, or a Tesla as your product increment? So now I want to kind of further explain all what I've said earlier, so you further understand what happens in the Scrum team. Now, during the Scrum process, the first event that happens is to create the product backlog, which is done by the product owner. Product owner creates the product backlog and make sure that the product backlog is transparent enough and visible enough for the team members to understand. So the development team take items from the product backlog and add it to the sprint backlog. Now, during the daily Scrum is when the developers decide on what particular sprint to work on, what particular product backlog item to work on a particular day. And after that, they then create the sprint backlog is created. Then after that, they create a product increment, which is being reviewed during the sprint review by the key stakeholders. And then after that, they now have the sprint retrospective, which is where they decide on how far they've gone so far, all the problems they actually faced during the sprint, and also review all the projects they've done that were successful during the sprint. And then a product increment is being released. Then now let's talk about scaling Scrum. Now scaling structure is achieved by the utilization of the Scrum concept, where multiple teams deliver a fully integrated set of potentially achievable increments of products at the end of this sprint. Now we all understand how a Scrum team works. Now we should, like I said earlier, in a Scrum team, you should actually have 10 members or less. But that doesn't mean you can't have more than 10 people working in a Scrum team. So in a Scrum team, if you're having more people, it's advisable to create teams for each, create sub-teams for each development team. So if it's a big project, you can actually have like team A, team B, or team C. Then have each developers, then they come together and decide on which particular product backlog item they want to work on. So when they discover that, then they share themselves with the developers are cross-functional and they're self-managed. So they don't need the Scrum Master to decide that for them. They have to decide that and make the decision of which particular team member will be working on a particular thing. So when they've done that, we should also know that since they are all working together on the same product, they have to have one product backlog item, one product owner, and one product goal. But each team can have their own sprint goal because they're working in separate things, so they can have their own sprint goal, but they should be able to integrate, after each sprint, they should be able to integrate all their products increments together and they should be able to create all their work together to create one increment, or to create an increment which will be released after the sprint. Then we have some scaling Scrum framework. These are like the framework that is used in scaling Scrum, which is scaled agile framework, the last scale Scrum, which is called LESS, the Scrum at Scale, and the Nexus by Ken Schwaber, who is also one of the co-founders of Scrum.org. So yeah, I'm just going to briefly just remind us of what I've been saying so far, which is Scrum, which is a lightweight, which is used to manage complex projects. Then we have 3 pillars in Scrum. We have the transparency, the inspection, and the adaptation. And Scrum actually is based on empiricism and lean thinking. Then we have 3 members in Scrum, which is product owner, Scrum Master, and developers. The values on Scrum, which is focus, respect, openness, courage, commitment. The 5 events, which are the sprint planning, sprint review, sprint retrospective, and daily Scrum. Then the artifact, which is the product backlog, sprint backlog, and the product increment. Then we now have the definition of done, which is a commitment from the product increment, which we should also note that if a particular product backlog item does not meet the definition of done, a product increment cannot be released or created. So thank you. Any question?
I have a question.
Yeah, you can have.
All right, thank you for this wonderful presentation. So my question is, I personally I happen to be in a situation whereby I happen to be the Scrum Master for a particular product and a product owner as well. So I'm working with the developer teams, then with the product design team. So my point is I'm having some kind of challenges because we are trying to build a mobile app. So and we have our design to design a particular screen, then our developers will work on it. But now I'm working with two designers. So the challenges I'm facing is that, okay, let's say for example now we happen to work on a particular screen, so we want to create a low fidelity or high fidelity design. But you just mentioned that there's nothing like a team leader. What if I assign maybe out of those two people, or I say I'm working with two designers, I happen to assign one of them to be a team leader, so that, because I feel like right now I've not done that and it's looking like I can't even get, I can't get delivery actually works. So that is my question. Then the second thing is that the second question I want to ask, it's related to Scrum, it's not related to Scrum. In creating a mobile app, is it advisable that we just need to design the whole mobile app first before developers start working on it, or the designer can start working on it there, maybe design the first sprints, we develop it. As they're developing a designer, people can be working on the second screen and something like that. So which one is more advisable? Which one is a better way of achieving that? So that is my question.
All right, thank you so much. Sorry, who just spoke? Because I'm actually finding it very. What is your name? Because I'm actually finding it very hard to view people.
Nuruddin.
Okay, sorry. Okay, Nuruddin. Okay, I think your first question will be about managing your team and delegating tasks to someone who can be like the team lead of the particular team, right? So I think it's advisable they know that. I think it shouldn't just be in Scrum. I think it would be better if everyone knows that there's no like a leader to assign work to them, so they can approach the person in a personal perspective and be able to be free to talk to the person. Because I believe when there's this hierarchy of team lead, you always have this authority over people. And I feel when you have this relationship with your team members, like a mutual relationship with them, and not being bossy or you have to be self-managed. Like I said, Scrum team is self-managing. So that means they have all the ability to create the project, right? But I feel you should also make sure that even if you assign someone to be a team lead, make the person know that you are a servant leader. You are not there to just control the person. If the person have any difficulties, you should be able to explain to the person, okay, yes, this is how to do it. This is how to not be like bossy and just. You understand what I'm trying to say? Because a project manager is not actually a Scrum Master. So like you said now, you're just assigning, are you said a UI UX team or something? I can't really remember.
This is what I'm saying. I said I happen to be a Scrum Master at the same time.
Are you the Scrum Master?
Exactly. That is what I'm trying to tell you.
Okay. Then if
the Scrum Master, it's more like a startup,
okay.
not something formidable. I'm the Scrum Master with that product.
Like I said earlier, sorry, a Scrum Master is a servant leader. Okay, so what you have to do, your job is not really to tell the developers who to assign as a team lead. If they need to assign a team lead, the developers themselves come together and decide, okay, we want this particular person to be the team lead. That is the essence of a Scrum team. Like I said, Scrum team is self-managing. The developers do all the work themselves. Nobody tells them how to do the work, or nobody tells them who to assign a task to. So if you really want to practice Scrum, you are the one to inform the development team that, oh, this is how Scrum is done. You should actually, I don't need to be part of the decision making to create a team lead or anything. You guys come together and make sure that, okay, the person you're assigning, because even in Scrum, there's nothing like a team lead. So make them understand that even if you decide to have like a team lead, make sure that, especially the team leader, you are also someone who is to serve the team. Your job is not to boss them around and only to just give them tasks. You also have a responsibility to also take up tasks in the team. So I think that is clear enough, right?
All right, thank you. So this my second question.
Okay,
Do you remember?
can you remind me, please?
Okay, my second question is that in developing a mobile app, I mean app
Yes.
development, is the best approach, what is the best approach out of these two? Like,
Okay,
do
I
you
think,
have the
yeah.
designer created a full, I mean, maybe high fidelity design for the whole app, then your developers can start working on it. Or you can be having designer working on it, maybe they just make the first screen, the developers can work on it. Then as they're working on it, the designer are working on the second sprint, like concurrently like that. So which one is the best approach?
The best way is to work concurrently so that if you are facing any challenges along the way, you can easily change, you can easily improve it, update it. And that is why I said earlier that, I'm trying to remember something. That is why I said earlier that a Scrum team, we have to be transparent, we have to we have to be able to expect that there's an obstacle coming up and also be able to adapt to change. And for that to happen, you have to work in increments. Scrum generally is based on working in increments and working in sprints, right? So for you to have a good product increment by the end of the day or by the end of each sprint, you should work in increments, you should work bit by bit. That is why it's required to have daily stand-up, which we all have in Bincom. You have daily stand-up, so you can be able to review what have been done 24 hours ago and what you're about to do in the next 24 hours. Is that clear?
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Amen, I have a question. And my question is a bit not, let me just say, it's more like the general concept of Scrum ideology,
okay.
which you explain. And in your explanation, you said Scrum is a kind of self, how do you put it? Like a self-managing stuff.
Yeah.
That there's no leader, no this thing. The only thing, there's no hierarchy. The only thing is what's it called? Scrum master.
Scrum master, the product owner, then the development team.
So a situation where we all know that we are all human. And let me give you this analogy. Let me assume that, okay, you have a product, but that product have tools that you use to manage the product. But let me use car as one of the tools. You know, while you are using the tools, you need to manage them. You need to, like, when they need servicing and when they need when there's an issue with the tire or something, you need to manage them to make them function in a way that, because if anything is happening to car, if the car is not in a good condition, definitely it will affect the product, because it's one of the tools that we use to manage the vehicle. So what I'm trying to say in essence is that you emphasize many times that there is a transparency, which is very obvious that without transparency, there's no way we can achieve the two others. I can't remember precisely what you call them, but because you are very fast, so I'm just trying to pick some things in my head. So in that situation where the people wanted to talk, but due to some kind of how do I put it? Some kind of feelings that, oh, maybe some people like talking, some people can ask questions. Why some people understand, look at the environment before they ask questions? Because they sense that some information has over, like, too much information. How do people like break that barrier between too much information, where other people will consider as too much information, and the person that feel like, if I ask this question, if I don't ask this question, or if I don't try to raise this issue, probably it might, at the long run, it might create a problem for the team, which the entire team will come back to the beginning. What I'm trying to say is that who will be responsible, in charge, to manage this kind of like hardly some situation that is hard to see, and in which we can somebody, because it's obvious that not everybody will be able to ask questions, but some people may have. How do you manage that? And how do you spot it? Because I saw where you put a sign or in the pothole and all that. And I'm beginning to imagine, based on your analysis, because it was clear enough to understand how this framework, the concept of this Scrum ideology, how do you manage that? I don't know if you understand my question.
I understand your question. Okay, you're just saying there has to be someone who will actually manage the team, right? Okay, that is the work of the Scrum Master. Like I said, your Scrum Master is like a servant leader. There's a difference between a project manager and a Scrum Master, right? A project manager can manage the team, you get, but a Scrum Master is more like a servant leader. He's giving them up. He's like a mentor, a tutor. You actually don't tell them what to do. You just explain to them, this is how you are going to do it. Do it like this. You don't give them directions. You just tell them, this is how you are going to do it like this. Then development team who are in charge of making sure that the particular product increment is being created, then come together as a team collectively, then work on the question or on the problem they are having together, because they have to be transparent. They have to be able to inspect that there's a particular problem coming up, and they have to be able to adapt to change. And also, we should also look at the 5 values of Scrum, which is courage, commitment, openness, sorry, I've forgotten the names. I think focus and one other word. Then Scrum team has to be focused. The Scrum team has to be committed. The development team themselves has to be committed to that particular project. They have to be committed before they can be able to release a valuable increment. So the Scrum Master's job is to make sure that the Scrum team practice Scrum. So you explain that, okay, this is the Scrum rules, this is Scrum events, this particular Scrum event, which is a sprint planning, must not go past these 8 hours, because the sprint planning event takes about 8 hours, 8 hours or less. When it's 8 hours, you're done. Even if you've not achieved your goal after that 8 hours, you have to wait until the next sprint before you can do that. So it's the Scrum Master's job to make sure that everything is done, but he's not going to impose it on them, like imposing. It's just going to be telling them, okay, this, according, if you really want to practice Scrum, this is how it goes. It's like a tutor, like a facilitator, to make sure that all the sprints are productive and all the sprint events are productive and they are kept on time. So I don't know if that explains better what you just asked. If you
Yes.
All right, thank you. So I think I'm saying Adeyinka's and
okay. All right. Good morning, everyone. All right. I know it's past 9:45, but I just want to quickly make a clarification about the concept of no team leadership in Scrum, and the reason why the Scrum team is not so large. Because when you mean there is no leadership, it might be confusing to some others, because we need to clarify between a technical team and a project team, a Scrum team. Because when you are trying to form your team, you don't just bring on people that are not needed in the project. So as opposed to what you have for a technical team, that's where you have a team leader. Even if you are a team leader in your own technical team, when you come to form a Scrum team, you don't need to forget about you being the team leader. You are here in this team to do what is to play your own part to achieve the main goal of this project. So the concept of team leadership here should not be confused with those we have in the technical team. Yes, if you are a technical team lead, you being in a specific Scrum team, you just need to forget about you being the technical team team lead. Then concentrate on playing your own part in this particular team. So I think that might clarify the conception between not having a technical a team lead in a Scrum project.
okay, thank you so much, Adeyinka. I don't think we have any other question.
Yeah, at this point, I won't take another question because you are already behind schedule. So, Amen, check your chat. I dropped something for you. Yeah, this brings us to the end of today's KD. Thank you everyone for joining today's KD. Have a lovely